this scene here is what we'll basically be doing today. Something similar to this. I'll probably make it a bit more detailed because we've got some more time here. But essentially, a lot of my paintings, I do them in 2 steps. So I paint all the light areas first. So when I talk about light areas, I'm basically meaning predominantly all the warm colors, so all the yellows, all the pinks, and all the reds. And then what I do after that is that I add in all the dark areas. So some of it's done in wet into wet. So as I'm doing like the warmer areas, I also drop in some of the darker bits at the bottom so that it blends in nicely. But for the most part, it's just painting the light areas, waiting for that to dry, and then we'll go over and we do all the dark areas like the sky, bits of the windows, things like that in the painting. So here's a few more that I've done. And with the similar sort of style where I've emphasized a lot of the light and basically a lot of the warm colors on the buildings. And when you have complementary colors, so if you've got basically warm and cool colors next to each other, you can get these really interesting, vibrant contrasts. So that's just something that I like doing with my paintings. I like lots of contrast and lots of kind of complementary colors. So it really has a sort of striking appearance. So don't feel you have to use these exact colors as well. You can change them around. You can mute them down a little bit so they're not as bright. It's really up to you, but I'll just show you kind of what I do through this class. I also have some drawings and kind of like line and wash drawings that I do as well on top of my other, paintings. So
those
again,
are also beautiful too, by the way. Lovely work.
Oh, thank you, Anna. It's nice of you. So yeah, just little bits and pieces like this, and using these same complementary color combinations. Got these yellows, warm colors, and then you've got blues and purples and things like that. Having them next to each other, I find really just makes the painting look a lot more interesting. So
those are amazing. We're in for such a treat tonight.
Yeah, so this is just some little sketches. And, I'll talk about sketching today as well. I'm not going to go through pen sketching, but pencil sketching, I mean, it's pretty similar. It's just with pen sketching, you're taking more time with it. You're being a bit more careful. So that's a bit of my work. And, if you, just so that you can have an idea of my style and things like that. Okay, so
thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That was really nice to see and kind of get us in the zone for art tonight.
Yeah, no, that's completely fine. Happy to show you guys. Got this little coin in the corner because sometimes the camera may not focus properly. So as I start drawing, it's going to be a lot easier. So Anna's put something in the attachments, or you probably have it already, the reference photo for this workshop.
Yes.
So
the reference photo is in the chat now, and also the PDF file that has a list of supplies that you will need if you are painting along with us tonight.
Yeah, fantastic. And I've actually put on probably more supplies than you need in there. I really don't use too many brushes or too many paints. So I've just put in a few more in there just in case people want a bit more variation. But yeah, so just have your reference photo. Look, you don't actually need to have it up on the screen, but if you have it or if you've already kind of drawn it in, that's fine as well. But I'm going to go through the whole drawing. If you can't see or if there's any issues during the drawing, just let me know as well, and I'll stop and adjust. Sometimes I move the paper and things. So the first thing to kind of keep in mind with the drawing is that you want to look at the reference photo in terms of real basic shapes. So if I look at this scene, essentially we've got the horizon line, and that runs about a third of the way from the bottom of the page, probably a little bit more than a third of the way. Okay, so it doesn't honestly matter all that much where you put it, as long as you've got enough sky in there. Okay, and also depends on the type of scene that you want to paint. If you want to emphasize more of the water, then you can leave less of the sky. But for this one, we're going to do more of the sky. So what we'll start off first is just drawing a horizon line in. Like I said, around the 1/3 mark or just above that mark. So I'm getting the pencil and just drawing a real basic sort of line going across the page like this, okay? And you want to be pretty loose with the pencil work as well. You don't want to go too dark. Remember, it's a painting. You want to have enough of the detailing with the pencil so that it gives you an indication of where to go with the paints after. But if you start drawing things in too dark and things like that, it just becomes a little bit hectic. So remember, just keep it loose and do most of the detailing with the actual paint itself. So there's a few different shapes here. We've got obviously we've got the sky, and then we've got the water, and then we've got these two shapes at the side here. I don't even look at them really as buildings. And this is a lovely scene of Venice. It's a nocturne scene of Venice. And the challenge in watercolors is actually leaving a lot of these light areas, preserving the light. So I'll show you how to do that all later. But what we're going to do, we're going to start off just around the center of the page. I think I'll go around about here. So if you look at the dome, so that's the Santa Maria della Salute. I think it's a minor cathedral. I don't know, not exactly. I think that's what I read somewhere. But I've been there. It's basically, you've got the dome right here, and then you've got this little kind of shape in the background. It kind of sticks out, and that's about, it's kind of a little tower. I don't know if you can see it, left of all these domes. So we're going to start right there. That's about a little bit left to halfway of the page. So notice how when I'm drawing, I'm always referencing I'm always referencing where objects are in terms of their location on the horizon line, how far in the middle of the page, that kind of thing. So that actually helps you to place them properly. So I'm going to go in and we're going to just pop in the bottom area of it. It sort of comes down here. It's like a squarish, rectangular sort of shape like that, very, very quickly. And then it's on the top, we've got a little section here as well, just of the dome. So it's just a tiny little shape like that, okay? So what we're going to do now is that we're just going to start working on the rest of this scene here on the right-hand side. The most important thing here with this scene is the actual domes. So you have to get the domes in with a little bit more detail, a little bit more finesse, because that's sort of like the focal point of this whole painting. So it all looks very complicated here, and you've got windows, you've got doors, you've got all kinds of stuff going on, but look at it as a big shape. And if you can simplify this down, you've almost got a large shape just running across like this. And it almost goes across there. And then up here, we've got a building like that. And it's kind of, you can see the side of it here. It comes down like that. Holding the pencil also kind of at the end helps, so that it's just a bit looser. I'm going very light as well. So there we go. We've got a bit of that side of the building, and then we've got this building here that basically just cuts in front of that one. And I find with the buildings in the foreground, you just got to be a bit more. You got to give it a little bit more detail and a bit more care. Okay. And I've actually extended this a little bit further than the reference picture, but that's okay. We can play around with that, okay? And that's the side of the building, okay? Since we're here, pop in a couple of windows like this as well. And the important thing is to place, just look at around where the windows start and end on the reference photo. So they're almost taking up thirds of this building. So if you were to draw an imaginary line here and here, these two windows fall on the first and second third from the top of the building. So that's the way I kind of do things to, in my mind, to sort of space it out and make sure that there's enough room. Because when I was first starting to paint and draw, I'd often leave out, this section, and I might make this window too big and I forget that I have to do a third one. So this is just a way that you can kind of measure a bit with your eyes. Now over this side, actually, I might just make up a little bit more detail. Let's pop in like a window here or something, just a square window, and maybe a couple more of these other windows here on the side, kind of just mimicking those ones over there. Maybe another door or something here, who knows. And a little bit of detail here for the side of the building, like that. Okay.
Are those little dots that you're making along the way kind of helping you mark where you're going to put your line as you're going?
Yeah, like I kind of just, really put in a really loose line, and then I'll just, I know what you're saying. I kind of mark out, okay, here's where this building, kind of the middle point of the building, and then this is where another part this other building touches the center of that building. So you're kind of using existing structures here to guide you in where to put all the other structures. So I often talk about, if you get the big shapes in correctly, when I say correctly, like more or less accurately in there, you can use the big shapes to then guide you where to put the smaller shapes. So always focus on the big picture, these larger sort of shapes, and the rest of it will fall in place for you. And like I said, you don't have to make it exact to the reference photo as well. It all depends what you kind of want to portray in your scene. Sometimes I really emphasize these domes and I make them pretty big, if I want to draw attention to that area. So it's not a necessity, but if you want to paint something that looks like the reference, it's just something you have to keep in mind. So these domes, we've drawn in this big massive shapes here, which are basically just buildings, and we'll put in a bit more detail there later. But I'm going to draw in the top of this dome. Okay, we'll start off here, just where the top of the dome begins, and I'll just sketch in a little area like this. Okay, it's all of it. Just think of it as a circle, and you're drawing a semicircle. Then on top of that, we're going to look at the shape here. It's a kind of little, don't know what they are, little spires and things that go up, and then on top of that we've got another semicircle or little dome like that. So, and then I think there's a statue or something on top. So that's basically it. You can bring this down as well here, and there's little openings, little windows and things here, which I'm just going to mark out, because when we go in with the paint later, it just helps to know where they are.
So just like little guides for when you're painting later?
Yeah, basically. Just think of the drawing as a plan for your painting. And the great thing about drawing is that it actually helps you with your painting, because painting is essentially, it's drawing, but with a lot more variation. You can cover larger areas, there's more techniques, but you can lighten, darken things. So there's definitely a great argument to sort of a great reason to practice drawing and composing and just getting used to it. Okay.
Sorry, there's a question from one of our viewers. Is it always best to start the building sketch from the side of the paper, or is there a better way to do so, or any tips on that?
Yeah, so with the drawing, look, people do this all different ways. I would say the best way is to put in the most obvious shapes first. So the most obvious shapes are kind of really large shapes, large buildings, separations between the sky and the water, that kind of thing, sky and ground. It could be a big tree. So starting with those things first will help you. It just makes it a lot easier. You're getting the easy stuff out the way. And it's also the larger things that are easier to position on the page. Because if you've got a little boat that you're trying to place somewhere here, it's a lot harder to sort of figure out where it stands if you haven't got these larger shapes in. So I wouldn't say there's a specific place that you'd start. I started here because I thought positioning this little shape here, this little tower here. It was kind of like the middle part of the page where I could position that, and then the rest of it will sort of form the basis of where I put everything else.
So it kind of all flows as you get going.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I'm just going to pop in a little shape of this building here as well. There's a lot of detail in here, but the main thing is just to keep some of these sort of roof shapes. And I'm drawing these, I don't know what you call them. They're kind of like rectangles on the sides like that, to just show the roof sections. Forgotten my geometry. There's a name for these shapes. It doesn't matter.
I can't remember either. Does anyone else remember what they are?
I didn't pay attention in school.
Oh, that's okay. We were busy doodling, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. So just little bits of pieces like that helps to indicate these rooftops. And you don't have to draw all of them in as well. Notice on top of these roofs, there's all these little bits and pieces sticking out too. So you can kind of like just get in a few, draw them in like that. There's overlapping shapes. There's even a building here. And like I mentioned, you don't have to get everything in. Just a few little buildings and things will pave the way. So just emphasize and mark out a few of these windows and things as well here. So this is going to help when we go and do the painting later too. It's actually a building that comes up here, sort of intersects there, and there's a sort of rooftop there. But essentially we've just got this large clump of shapes, okay? Bits and pieces on the rooftop.
So everything is kind of like a little map for your painting. You're prepping yourself to paint with the shapes and all that?
Yeah, it's kind of like composing, just composing the painting and planning out where you want everything to be. So that's probably the most amount of detail that I'm going to pop into that side. I know there's little boats and like these little poles sticking out of the water, which you sort of emphasize, put in a bit like that just to remind you. But a lot of it, that's pretty much finished over on that side in terms of the drawing. A bit of that, it's kind of like a landing dock or something there. And so we'll start over on this side. Now we've got an indication of where this little area is. I don't know what it is. It's a little tower or what have you. We're going to just leave a bit of space here and roughly go up. Now, if we look at this building that's closest, as part of this huge shape here, we'll notice that it sort of finishes where the roof starts on that building is where it sort of this top part of the dome starts. So I'm just going to mark that there roughly, and I'm going to draw a line downwards. And I'm doing this so that, again, we're using this shape to guide and place all these other shapes so that they're kind of relative to one another. This one's not enormous, so you don't want the roof coming out all the way here. So that's popping out of the page. You want it to be all in proportion to one another. So that's what I'm essentially doing. So a bit of this rooftop like that there. And just having a look around what else there is. There's even, we might just pop in this one here as well. So it comes forward, it sort of intersects, and there's another building here too. Here, sort of coming halfway up like that.
Do you ever choose to omit anything, or you just kind of follow what you see?
Oh yeah, I always definitely omit stuff because, especially in a drawing like this, there's so much detail, and if you're gonna sit here and do every little detail, I mean, it's possible, but it's going to take a really long time, and it also depends on your style and I prefer to do things a bit more loosely and have that kind of I mainly just want to capture the feeling of the scene rather than capture the exact little details everywhere, more like a photograph. And I do respect artists that do that. I think it's amazing, but you know, the main thing is I just want to capture that feeling and the main shapes in here that make up this particular scene. So, you know, for example, this bit here, I've emphasized this building a little bit more. This one and this building here on the side, kind of just drop this down into a more basic sort of shape, you know, like that. A lot of this is just painted in one big wash, and you know, you're adding in some different colors here and then maybe some bits of detail afterwards. So you're thinking of this as one big shape. One thing I've forgotten to do is I've forgotten to actually add these other domes. So I'll just put them in here too. This one finishes a little bit further down here. There we go. That's one. And there's these little towers and things as well going towards the right-hand side. Yeah. Another tower to the right, top right there. And you can use this process that I'm doing basically to draw anything, portraits, buildings.
Is everybody sketching along right now? How is the sketch going for you guys? Amazing. Somebody says amazing. I can tell in the mini workshops when everyone's working alongside with the artist, because it's like you're all in focus. You're all very intent on your work here. I love it.
Yeah.
Someone else says, great, thank you.
Awesome. So we're almost done. I just want to get this done. I don't want this whole thing to be a drawing, and I sometimes get a bit bogged down with the drawing, and I enjoy it, the drawing in its own part as well. So this building is interesting. You've got the side of the building, and then on top of it, you've got this kind of triangular sort of shape. So it's kind of comes up here, and then that forms part of the rooftop like that, and kind of like this. And then we've got this sort of section running back like that there. So it's kind of, look at the shapes in terms of just, you know, the buildings in general shapes, and I find that helps. Say, oh, that's a triangle, that's a square, that's a box. And if you can draw a box, then you can draw a building. So this is really large, this building here on the side, and I'm going to bring that down. This is the final building that sort of hits that side of the page. So, you know, lots of detail in here, and you know, like I said, I just want to simplify this down. Okay, and you know, they've got a bit of rooftop or something like that sticking out the side there, and what is it? A section there. You know, very loose work, and I'm going to connect this up with this section as well. So it actually goes up a little bit further and then comes down like that. Okay, and you know, I've kind of overshot. I've gone this. I made it a little bit too high, but that's all right. Work with what we've got. Really, the last thing you want to do is just put in a little guideline for the floors. And if we look at this building, we've got essentially four floors. In here, we've got this sort of, the top floor is a little bit smaller, but we can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, like that.
So you're like pre-guiding yourself for that section?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So then when you place these windows and things like that, and they don't have to be perfect, you're just putting them in because there's so much in here. And beginners will look at a picture like this and they think, Jesus, how am I gonna paint this? How am I gonna even draw this?
Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming for sure.
Yeah, but if you break it down into small components and small, you do the big shapes and then place the small shapes within the big shapes, you'll be fine. And I'm going and adding, a little bit more detail just to show you, if you want that much detail. But when you're doing a sketch, even if you're doing it on site or if you're doing it at home, that kind of thing, it's, you can decide how much detail you want in there. Okay, so the bottom of the building, it sort of finishes about here and then goes in like that here. So there's a lot of windows and things, doors. There's a large one here. Okay. So that's basically about it. I mean, there's boats and things which we can pop in here. A lot of these little wooden pylons, popping out as well. There's these little, what are they called? These little jetties or moors, I suppose, where boats are, docking, things like that. There's even one here at the bottom, which I can just quickly pop in. It's so dark, I can just barely see what's in there. I mean, this could even be a boat that's, a little bit closer or something like that. But that's it. I mean, that's really all you need for the drawing. So, same thing goes for some of these buildings. You can just pop in a little indication of where the doors and things are, marking out, separating this out to 4 floors. But I would say that's generally enough detail to get started. So how's everyone going? Hope you're following along all right.
Yeah, and it looks amazing. I hope you guys are doing okay on yours too. If you have any questions, let us know so we can help answer them.
Yep. Awesome. So we're going to get started onto the actual painting, and for with larger washes, I often like to use larger brushes. I mean, larger shapes, larger brushes. It just keeps that wash looking a lot smoother. You can pick up obviously more color. So I've got a number 10 round brush and also a number 2 mop brush. The sizes of the brushes don't matter all so much. You want to think about the bit of paper you're painting on. Is it a big bit of paper? Is it a small bit of paper? What's the size of the objects? So these brushes, in relation to all these buildings, you can still get in enough detail in terms of a really quick wash of color over the top, but still cover all this stuff pretty quickly. So I'm going to use these brushes. For example, if I started to use this brush, which is, it's pretty big, I can still get away with it, but it might, I might lose out in a bit of detail. Or for example, I use this little brush here and I try to paint in all these buildings, a big wash of color at the top. This is going to take me all day. So you want to pick a brush like this. That's, relation to the paint.
You're kind of matching like the size of the brush with the shapes that you're generally seeing in your drawing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's such a good tip. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, just move my palette a little bit closer so you guys can see it. I cleaned it today, given it a little bit of a clean, and it's usually a complete mess.
Artists are always so nice to clean their palettes out for us, right?
One of my students, he always has a bit of a freak out when she sees my palette. It's just all over the place. But it's actually a good idea to clean the palette when you're doing paintings that have a really strong yellows or like a very pure looking color in areas. Otherwise, it just mixes up and gets a bit muddy. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to mix up a whole bunch of warm colors. I've got a bit of paro orange here. This is a bit of lemon yellow here. I might get a bit of red, and I work out of pans, these sort of dried pans, and I like to give them a little spray beforehand just to activate the paints, make them easier to pick up. So let's drop in a bit of yellow around here, just a bit of that lemon yellow, and I know it's mixed around with the with the orange, but that's all right. We can also drop in some of the roof areas. So this is a bit of burnt sienna here. But what we want to do is basically just get in more of this yellow and lighter section down the bottom. So I'm always just varying the color. I find that helps create a bit more interest. And we're finishing it off just around about where the rooftop finishes on these buildings. So if you go over, it's not a big deal as well, because later we're going to get the sky in. That's going to be a fair bit darker. So I'd just like to use a bit of burnt sienna on the rooftops. We're popping in this wash of paint. It's a very light wash of paint. I'd say about 1/4 paint to 3/4 water. And using different yellows. I've even got some Naples, a bit of Naples yellow here, which I'm dropping in. It's a kind of a creamy yellow. You can mix some white gouache into your normal, your normal yellow ochre or lemon yellow to get that color. And I'm just dropping in a bit of color here for these towers in the background, bits and pieces there. Okay.
And I see you're just mixing right into the color that you prepared. Is that okay to kind of get some other colors mixed in there as well?
Yeah, so you can just drop in whatever colors you want. I think having like wet on wet effects like this actually makes it look more interesting. So you don't always have to do all your mixing on the palette. I prefer actually doing a lot of my mixing and letting the colors run a little bit on the actual paper itself. If you're feeling a bit adventurous, you can even pick up a tiny bit of purple and drop it in some sections where you see some darkness. So, this bit here, that's a bit of darkness on that side of the building. Maybe a bit here, there, bit on the rooftops and things like that as well.
So the purple is kind of acting as like the shadow?
Yeah, and the rooftops, the darker rooftops. Okay, but we've got to remember at this stage, we're not trying to detail anything really. We're just trying to pop in the colors and a little bit of those ideas of shadows, that kind of thing. But we're being very careful to preserve these warm colors on there. We don't want to put too many darks in there just yet, but just a little bit like that should do the trick. So I'm going to go over to this left-hand side now and do the same, pretty much the same thing. So we'll start off with the yellow at the bottom. I'm doing that because over here, there's a lot of light coming out from the bottom of the painting. So a little bit more yellow in there. The buildings are kind of like a Naples yellow color, but we're going to mix in a few other bits and pieces as well. Maybe some of this burnt sienna, tiny bit of burnt sienna in here, like that. Drop that in, and we'll just kind of touch onto the edge of where the yellow starts, like that, so that there's a bit of blending, but also there's a transition, and you can tell there's different colors in here. Okay, I'm always going back and picking up different colors and dropping them in, changing it up as I go along. Might grab a bit more orange, for example, and drop some of that in here. Brush is getting a little bit too big to do what I need to do, so I can just pick up a smaller brush and go ahead and get in these sides of the buildings like that. And I'm going to fade that off, get it, just lighten down that color around this section here. Okay. All right.
When you say lighten, how are you doing that exactly?
So when you want to lighten a color in watercolors, just add water. So if you add a little bit of water to whatever color you're using, it's going to lighten that down.
Awesome. Thank you.
No worries.
And Darren, just so you know, we're just a little bit past our half-hour mark.
Okay, fantastic.
I think everyone's really enjoying everything. Got some people hard at work tonight.
I hope this is challenging enough. It will sort of teach you guys, the general process that I use pretty much for all the paintings I do. And, if you can paint some of these buildings, which are, I would say they're pretty complicated. There's a lot going on in here, then you're not going to have any issues at all painting, some smaller buildings and things like that, suburban buildings. Same like what I was doing before. I'm just adding in a tiny bit of purple color here on the side of that building, tiny bits running through the building as well, just to get some variation in color, you know, and then the rooftops there as well. Okay.
And you're very loose with your brush strokes. Does that help with just kind of letting the watercolor flow?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you want to let the watercolors kind of do a lot of the work for you, if that makes sense. Because when you let it do its thing, it just ends up looking a lot more beautiful, and you get effects. You essentially get effects that you can't really get if you do yourself. You can't even really paint some of this stuff, some of this wet and wet stuff, if you try doing it yourself. It just doesn't work. It has to organically flow, and paints just diffuse out by itself. I got a little spray bottle here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray the top of this section a little bit, so that it keeps this area slightly damp in some parts. Okay, just a preference. You don't need to do this. If you let it dry, that's fine as well, because we're going to cut around most of these buildings. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring all this color, you know, down to the foreground. So we're going to get a bit of this yellow, lemon yellow, and I'm just going to drop that in right there, like that, on the base of these buildings, over here as well. And I'm also going to pick up a bit of maybe some red, tiny bit of red, drop that in here, like that. You know, it's also, you know, over here we do have a bit of the sky, which is this sort of pinkish, orangey pink sort of color. And I'm going to just bring that wash up slightly, just around here, like that. Okay. And I want to have this section here still hopefully wet by the time I go back into it later, and we pop in all the bits of the remaining sky section.
So are you just adding more water to that area so you can make sure it still has that moisture?
Yeah, so just a little bit of water, a tiny bit of red in there, but I want to stop it around about here. So when I go in with the darker colors, I can cut around these domes so that it just looks a little bit more visible. So we'll see how that goes. It might dry off, but we can go and pop in the bit more red here at the bottom and carry this wash down the page. And you might be thinking, you know, what about all the blues and all the purples and stuff in here? We'll get to that in a moment. We just got to pop in some of these warm colors first. And over the top, that's where we'll drop in the rest of these purples and blues, any of the cool colors. I always work warm in the background and then cool colors afterwards. This is a really crucial part.
Is there a reason that you choose to do the warm before the cool?
Because it's very hard, like especially if you've got a lot of these lighter warm colors, it's almost impossible afterwards to put this stuff in over the top of the cooler colors, because cooler colors by nature, they're actually have a darker tone. And when you're working in watercolors, it's so much easier when you work from light tones to dark tones. So that's why I do it.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm starting to mix in a little bit of purple here. If you don't have purple, just grab a little bit of blue and mix that in with your red. Okay. Now I'm just going to get this out the way. I think sometimes I fiddle a bit too much and spend too much time in an area, but we want it to look nice and sort of smooth, and mainly just have a lot of warm colors running through here. Okay.
It really does look awesome. It's so inviting. I just want to like jump right in. How's everybody else feeling with your colors? Is everything going okay with the paint so far? I think it must be. We got some diligent painters tonight. Yes, we got some yeses in there.
Busy painting.
Yes, that's the fun of the mini workshop. Everyone's at work with you tonight.
you know, I'm just trying to keep this area wet. I always get a bit worried it will start drying before it's time. So over here, what we're going to do is I'm going to start picking up more of this purple paint, and this area is pretty wet, and it's starting to dry in some areas down the top. So we just want to pick up blues and purples. I've got a bit of, this is a bit of cobalt blue. Actually, ultramarine will work a bit better. It's got a red kind of basis and red bias. And this is where I'm just going to drop in a few little brush strokes like this. Okay, large brush strokes, and hopefully get in some darker ones here in the foreground, like that.
Is there any particular way you're holding your brush to make it easier for those strokes, or?
Yeah, so you want to hold the brush kind of near the end, and you're using your whole arm. If you can see your whole arm to do these large strokes. You may not need to use your whole arm if you're painting kind of in on a smaller bit of paper, but on larger bits of paper like this, it really does help. So what I'm going to do is I put in the materials to grab you know, some flat brushes, some small flat brushes, and if we look at the reflections of these buildings, there's a kind of downward like reflection in a lot of these areas. So I want to capture a little bit of that where possible. So I'm mixing up a little purple, a little bit of purple here in the palette, maybe with a bit of darker blue in there. And I'm going to drop a bit of that in, to pick up a bit of that color. It's almost half, 50% water, 50% paint. Pick up a little bit of it. And this area here, it's going to be partially dried, but mostly it's going to be wet, a kind of damp color. And you want to just drop in some vertical bits of color running down like this.
Does it matter where you're placing those? Yeah,
so you want to leave bits and pieces of these yellow in here, sort of almost where the yellow is of the buildings. So creating these little reflection-like effects. So here, you know, we've got a whole bit of light, and you can see the light reflected in the water. So you want to leave some of that in the water too. Okay, but it's not, doesn't need to be perfect. That's why I put in little bits of this purple in here before, so that it makes sense when I come down and do these little reflections, that it matches up with some of these shadows and things on the top. So, you know, we can also do a bit here.
And are you also kind of switching back and forth between your the flat brush sizes? I see it.
Yes, I am. Yeah. So it just makes it a little bit easier when I'm using a smaller flat brush in some areas, so I don't get a stroke that's too large and just blocks out all that light. It's so important with watercolors to preserve areas of that light in there, because it's you know, unlike oils and acrylics and things like that, you can't go over the top and reclaim those white areas afterwards. It's very difficult. So you're trying to just got to get it all done in one go, kind of thing. So doing the same thing, just popping in a few more of these sort of brush strokes. And later on down the track as well, I'm probably going to get some dry brush strokes running through this area too. But just a few of these vertical lines just helps. So great. Maybe
it's looking so cool. I love the color combination too. It's coming into play.
Getting there, yeah. Purples, you're kind of contrasting, yeah, you're contrasting all the cool colors with the warm colors. Now I'm looking at the bottom and I'm thinking this is not dark enough, so we can start just dropping in more color. And if you're finding things are starting to dry off and you don't want them to dry off, just pick up that spray bottle if you've got one and give it a bit of a spray from a distance. And I find that kind of helps. You know, I'm trying to keep that top bit also slightly damp. Okay, don't go overboard, but just a bit of spray in there will help again keep that area alive and easily workable in terms of these wet and wet effects. So, you know, let's put in a bit more blue in the water. I feel like there's not enough sort of stronger sort of blues. So I'm using a flat brush here. I might actually swap over to a smaller round brush number 10 round brush to pop in some more of these ripples, smaller ripples here in the foreground, like that.
What makes you decide to add some more of that darker color?
So with the darker color, especially near to the front, it just helps to imply depth in the painting. So often objects or things that are closer to the foreground, they do appear darker. So you just want to get in a few bits of darkness running through. It also really helps to contrast with the rest of the painting as well. So, if you've got all these lighter areas and then you've got a bit of darkness running through a section, it just creates more interest for the viewer.
That definitely makes sense.
Yeah, it sort of draws you into the painting. So, sometimes I'll stand up as well, look at the thing. I'm sort of looking at it from a distance to see whether from a distance, whether it looks all right or not in terms of the balance of colors. We've got enough cooler colors here at the bottom, and then we've got enough kind of warmer colors and things near the top, and there's nothing that's too overpowering in an area. Just constantly adjusting and seeing what works well, what you might need to fix up, because when you're doing a lot of this wet work, you've got so many opportunities to change around, change things over, add different colors while the paint's still wet. So to darken down a bit of that foreground as well, I'm just picking up a bit of neutral tint, tiny bit of neutral tint, and just adding that into my blue. Okay, so that I've got some little bit more darkness in here. Some broad brush strokes as well, just running through this section.
Does it help to have more of that darker tone towards the bottom too, to kind of focus towards the brighter colors?
It does, yeah. It creates a strong contrast between all these buildings and the stuff at the bottom. So, okay, probably I'm getting to the point now where I might be overdoing it. So just, there's a point where you want to stop and you think, okay, it looks decent. So I'm gonna stop that part at the bottom now. I think I'm happy with it. Remember, all this is going to dry a lot lighter as well, so you don't need to worry about it being, if it looks a little bit dark, it will always dry slightly lighter. Okay, so we want to do the sky now, and what I want to do is pick up a little bit of water first. I'm just going to dampen this area down. I've accidentally mixed a bit of blue in there, but that's okay. I just want to dampen that area down here where the bit of the red of the sky is. Okay. We want to mix up a really dark color, essentially to do the rest of the buildings and the cutting around, that kind of thing. So what we'll do is I'm going to mix up a bit of, this is just a bit of cobalt blue here. Bit of cobalt blue. You can also use ultramarine blue. Okay. And I think I'll start off right at the top like that, pretty dark. Now you're thinking about 3/4 tone to 3/4 color to 1/4 water. Okay, so I'm just dropping that in at the top. I'm trying to get in a lot more of this paint, actually. I haven't mixed up enough. Okay, pretty dark starting off at the top. You can use all kinds of blues, really. I'm not fussed. Often I like to just mix around what feels good. I also love using purples too. So mixing a bit of red in there will help to create some kind of purpley areas, areas of interest. And we want to move this all the way down. And you kind of, around this section here where it connects on to the bit of the red and the sky, that's where you just got to be a little bit more careful. Okay.
The area we were spraying down a bit.
That's right, yeah. And notice how I've kind of kept it wet so that now there's a nice little transition area, so it's not all completely just a sharp edge there. So we've got a softer sort of edge.
So it kind of helps with the blending a bit with that extra water there.
100%, yeah. And always remember with the top of these sort of scenes, it goes from dark to light. So I'm just adding in more paint in the top section like that. And as we get to this section of the painting, this is when I'm going to start picking up smaller brushes to get in these details. So really, I'm going to be using, let's have a look, a couple of these flat brushes. Okay. And go in here. We'll do the top of this dome first. Yeah. I want to just make sure that it's dark enough too. And I want more purple in there, a little bit more purple. You're using this to cut around some of the shapes of this dome. Notice I've also left a bit of white too.
Does that flat brush help with to be a little bit more precise when you're getting closer to the building?
Yeah, and that's why I actually use it. A lot of beginner painters, they don't know how to use flat brushes. They often see watercolor paintings, they're all done in round brushes. But with buildings and geometric, man-made sort of geometric shapes like this, using a flat brush really helps to give you more control cutting around these shapes, because like I said before, these domes really, when people think of Venice or whatever landscape you're doing, if it's an architectural sort of landscape, they think of these domes, and that's why you have to be a little bit more careful here in having that round flat brush to sort of work around some of these shapes. It just helps to get those in a lot more accurately in terms of that cutting around. Okay, I just want a bit more blue here.
You also make it look very easy.
Oh, it's just a lot of practice, and it's taken me so long to get to this point where like I don't have to think as much, but it's really just practice to sort of get to the point where things you don't even really need to think about what you're mixing up. It just happens.
It just flows right out.
But trust me, it was definitely not the case. I've shown a lot of my students the stuff that I was doing back in 2014 or so, and it's very basic. It's taken such a long time to get here. And don't worry if you're a couple of years into painting and you're thinking, how am I going to ever do this? Often it's not a linear progression when you're painting. You might have a year or two. Sorry, just spray this down a little bit so it doesn't dry. You might have a year or two where nothing, you feel paint looks good, and but you might have a breakthrough. So it's not a continuous sort of progression.
So you're always kind of learning as you keep going.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and always, another thing I'd say is just expose yourself to different artists. Learn from different artists. Learn what they do. Different watercolor artists, watch their techniques, listen to their tips, because everyone's got a different way of doing things, and you might find a certain way resonates a bit more with your style and how you want to portray scenes. So
that's why we're all here. We're learning from Darren tonight. Loving it.
Because I know you guys at Etchy, you've got so many different courses and so many artists, and I think that's a great thing that you do, so people can get that extra exposure.
Absolutely. And we love our viewers, and just having that opportunity to share our artwork with you guys. And so thank you again for joining us. I hope you guys are still enjoying everything and painting along. One of my favorite things is to see some of the artwork at the end and see the variations that come through.
I love to see what people come up with, and sometimes people change them up to, you know, something quite interesting that I didn't even think of. So there's no right or wrong way in terms of like what to include, what not to include with all these shapes. You know, there was a last sort of demonstration I ran, and there was a lady there who added some telephone poles and things like that into this sort of urban landscape scene, and I thought that was pretty cool. You know, I didn't even think of that, but it helped bring out a different element to the painting. So I think it's important to try to make it your own. At times, you know, you get to a point where you know, you want to sort of experiment around and change things up a bit. Okay. These little bits of white that I've left in the on the rooftop as well is just a little bits of highlights. Okay, so it's just a little preference I do. So maybe indicating light coming in from the back, that sort of thing. So we can pretty much relax a bit now. Let this all dry. The only other thing that I might suggest is, you know, you can put in some, you know, some extra dark colors in the top part of the painting, you know, like this, just to further darken off some areas in the top section of the painting. But other than that, you know, that wash is done. And this is one of the most challenging parts of the painting, because you're kind of under time constraints. If you notice, I was just constantly working on making sure stuff didn't dry and that kind of thing. So yeah, add a little bit more darkness in here. You can even add some clouds. I'll show you how to add some soft clouds. It's a similar process to what we did at the bottom here. Just picking up a little round brush, pick up a bit of dark paint. So this is some sepia, and I'll grab a bit of ultramarine blue, mix that in, and you can just drop in a few clouds like that. Kind of.
Seems like you're like zigzagging the brush a little, like.
That's right. Yeah, I'm really just trying to make it as random as possible, because the moment you actually try to draw a cloud shape, often it doesn't. It just looks too forced. So sometimes I'm just closing my eyes, and I'm just dropping in the color, and let the watercolors do the work for you. Let the paint spread around and do its thing.
Trust the brush.
Yeah, basically. And when the paper's wet, it's going to just diffuse everywhere anyhow. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Cool. So I'm going to give this all a really quick dry off. I think if I can pause the microphone a little bit, because it could be a bit loud.
Yeah. I think usually Zoom will sound it out. And if not, I will definitely mute it for you so you can.
Oh, well, okay, cool. I'll start drying it off. But if anyone has questions, yeah, please feel free to ask any questions as well. I'll get back to you guys.
Absolutely. And if you guys are, see, look, Zoom magic, it's wonderful. If you guys are painting along with us, I just put in the chat, you can hashtag #@yourstudio, and Darren's Instagram is also in there, so you can tag him as well. And if you didn't know, this is available in recording. So if you're painting along, or maybe you're watching today, you can always rewatch when we release the recording to you in about 3 days. And it should come right to your email in a nice little Dropbox folder. So take a look out for that one. What are you guys enjoying so far? Did anyone surprise us and use different colors? Are we going to have like a little surprise at the end here? Type in the chat some questions or something different about your process. Maybe you're doing something a little different tonight. I love the little purples coming out in the sky. When he's drying, I can see them more clearly. It looks, and those clouds, I don't know. I don't know if I could zigzag the same way he did. If you guys haven't already, just make sure you sign up for our newsletter also. Great way to stay in the loop with our next coming mini workshops or some live demos. Come check us out. Yes, Shelley, I love the clouds too. They look so great. These colors, I love the bright colors. I'm always about bright colors. That's the fun of it. That's the fun, is that we all have different paintings. It's going to be awesome. Darren, I don't know if you heard us, but we have someone saying how they love the clouds, and how someone thinks their painting is going to be quite different than yours. So we're excited to see the outcome here. It's going to be fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks. And yeah, look, it's always good to just see what people come up with, and you know, if, for example, if it doesn't turn out the way that you expect it to, just you can give it a try later. A lot of these techniques, they take so long to sort of solidify in your mind. And I work out of sketchbooks a lot. When I'm bored, I'll just pick up my sketchbook and I'll do things like these clouds, just an area. But I'll do that, you know, I've done that hundreds of times, just dropping in paint into an area to see what it does. So every little bit of practice, every painting that you do, it sort of adds a bit of that brush mileage, and it helps you to improve just a little bit every time. And at some point, your brain will just click and you'll be like, okay, oh, I know what to do at that point. So it's a lot of repetition.
Yeah, thank you for the encouragement too, because I know when you're just starting, it's definitely harder to feel satisfied, and just continue on, guys. We got this.
Yep.
And Darren, just so you know, we're right at the hour mark.
The hour mark. Okay. So this last bit here, I find this kind of the fun part, where we can put in little bits of detail, bits of the rooftops, that kind of thing. And I don't use all that much color for the dark bits. I just pick out, you know, you can mix up a bit of gray. So you can mix up, you know, all your three primaries, red, yellow, and blue, mix them together to make a sort of darker color. Or you can get a bit of neutral tint, which is already a gray, Payne's gray. You can mix some ultramarine blue with a bit of burnt umber. That also creates a shadow sort of color. But I'm picking up a few different colors. I just want to change around the shadows a bit more. Okay, so that we've got a few different options of, you know, I've got some purples, I've got this sort of browny kind of color here, I've got this sort of blue puddle. So I'll start off first, and we'll want to use a brush that's smaller, because we're dealing with smaller shapes like these buildings here in the background, these smaller sort of domes and stuff. You don't want to go in with a gigantic brush and blot the whole thing out. So just drop that in lightly like that. And all we're doing is just popping in a light sort of wash over the top. And I would say this is about a quarter of this sort of dark color, and 3/4 water. Okay. And I'm always just sort of checking to see if this area is dark enough or not. I just want to make sure I've got enough in here.
Are you testing on another paper or anything on this to kind of check to see your color before you put it down?
Not really. I've just got a towel here which I just blot out, and you know, if I've got too much paint on there, I'll just dab that brush on.
Kind of helps soak up some of that color.
That's right. Yeah. So that's the top of this dome, like that. And then we've got these kind of little bits and pieces, these little spires and things popping through there, like that. Something like that should do the trick. And for the rest of it, we're just going to add in a bit of darkness underneath that dome. Remember to sort of preserve that shape of the dome as well. That sort of roundish shape. And here is where some of that previous stuff comes in handy that we were doing. We're just marking out little bits of detail on the bottom of the dome for these windows and stuff. That helps. And like I said before, like a lot of the time with your paintings, they're almost like, you know, you're almost like drawing. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm drawing with the paintbrush, but I'm also getting in a lot of darker bits of tone and things in here as well, changing around this color as I move on, leaving bits of that yellow and warmer color showing through as well.
And Darren, what kind of paper are you painting on tonight?
It's 100% watercolor, 100% cotton watercolor paper, and it's cold press, so it's got a slight texture. So it's like medium, I think it's called as well, medium cold press watercolor paper. You have to, it only really works, all this sort of wet and wet stuff only works in this way when you're using paper that has some texture to it. Yeah, it just mixes so much better if you have that.
Awesome. And are you kind of treating the paintbrush right now just like you would a pencil? It's very delicate and kind of following your previous markings?
Yeah, like, and I'm trying also not to get too bogged down with painting every little detail. So, you know, I'm thinking, how can I paint this shape with just the minimum number of brush strokes and to get in these details?
So this is where you start using your brain a lot more. Like, I got to think about all these marks I'm putting down.
Yeah, but you can take your time in this section. That's the good thing, because you know, we're not under any time constraints for stuff's drying and things like that. So, you know, these little towers here, just a little indication like that, that should do. Put a dome or something on top here. It goes towards the top like that. Right, that should do the trick. And the main thing is, like, I just want to get in some of the rooftops, which are darker, and join all these shadows on kind of to each other as well. So what I mean by that is have them sort of blend into each other a bit more. So that connects to that, that connects here. You know, this bit here, I might just connect that up with the little window or something here, swapping between these two smaller brushes. More darkness here, for example.
So similar to how you were drawing with pencil, you're kind of making those little connections between the buildings.
That's right, yeah. And I'm leaving bits of yellow showing through the page as well, so that it's not all complete darkness running through this whole area. A lot of times when I started painting, I would just color a whole area in the same color, and I wouldn't leave any spaces. And that's where a lot of those interesting effects actually come through. So just bring this down here. There's a bit of a shadow there. And also we can start popping in some windows. Just, you know, using a little round brush like that, just dropping in some sections of windows here, running down the sides of the buildings like that. Like that. You can even indicate a bit of the sort of the floors of the buildings as well. So again, you're just drawing with the brush. Very light, little spontaneous little dots and things just indicate the windows. There's so much stuff going on in here. And at a certain point, I sort of just stopped looking at the reference photo and getting what I think looks good. Oops.
It does. It's really starting to come popping out. It's awesome. How are you guys feeling about yours? Everyone doing okay still? Painting along? Any questions? Feel free to type them in the chat.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and just do the rooftop on this building here, which I'll just pop in like this, and also emphasize maybe the side of this building here. Okay, and this sort of rooftop connects on to this rooftop here, like that. Connecting that sort of dark shape on, like that. I'm making it a little bit darker here because these buildings are kind of in the foreground. Okay, and then moving down here, this side of the building is actually a little bit lighter. So I'm going to just lighten that down a bit.
And that's with a little bit more water to the color?
That's right, yeah, just a little, just add a little bit more water into that section. A bit more into the rooftops to darken further. So we've got this kind of transition to dark to light moving down the page. And, you know, we've got these windows and things as well, which we can just drop in like that. I'm not even that fussed to put in every little bit of detail, just something like that. And if you do miss out on a bit of detail, you can always go back into it later and add it on. So the same thing goes for these buildings here on the left-hand side. I'm just going to drop in a bit of darkness into the rooftop like that. Pick out just bits and pieces, areas where we want to darken down and imply some shadows on the buildings. Okay. That. Little bit of darkness on the rooftops to help it to pop out of the sky a bit more. There. We've got bits and pieces here of this building as well. You know, just swapping in between, you know, going through and getting some of these darks and shadows in. You know, we can actually put in little windows here as well, in that building here in the background. There's a sort of rooftop or something here. So it kind of looks like there's a building cutting in front of this larger building here in the background. And over here, I'm just going to start actually putting in some of these windows quickly with this round brush that I've got. We'll work all the way down. There's 4 floors of these windows, and just little brush strokes like that coming down the building to indicate these windows, frames and things like that. And of course, you can spend more time trying to add more detail if you'd like as well. It's up to you how much detail you want in there. I just want to really focus on the windows. You know, and there's so much in here, like I was saying before, there's so much going on in here. You really just got to pick out, some windows, some areas, and emphasize those. I always try to use a brush that's as large as I can to sort of put in all these details so that I don't get bogged down trying to fuss around too much. I'm going to just darken down this section.
I love how the blue strokes with the flat brush are really popping out now against the brush marks that you're putting in for the windows, and that help it enhance the buildings. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's all about contrast and a bit of opposition as well. I'll just pop in a few little indications of some darker windows in here, wet onto wet here. Okay. This building I've kind of made a little bit too long on that side, but that's fine. We'll just make do with that. Little strokes here just indicate again the kind of floors of these buildings.
That kind of helps so I
Okay.
can make it a little more separation. It looks really great.
Yeah, like if you look real close at it, it doesn't look like anything, but when you stand back and kind of have a look, it makes more sense.
Mm.
And I've got a bit of neutral tint here. I'm just going to add in some darker windows with a few quick brush strokes here at the bottom. And details, little bits of detail here. All right. Another thing you can do sort of at this point is if you've got a small round brush, you can pick up a bit of this paint and start dropping in things into the rooftops, like these little aerials, antennas and things like that. You can start just dropping bits and pieces in. And this just helps to increase, just add a little bit of detail for one, and also helps to sort of separate these buildings from the sky a little bit more. And you might have areas like you might think, okay, this little spire or here, I want to darken that down a little bit, emphasize that section on top. You can go ahead and do that with a little bit of darkness. It's all just tweaking and changing things around to the point where you feel happy with what's in there. You know, I thought I might get a little separation of the dome like that. That might look better. These windows, you know, can drop in a bit more paint like that. You know, and you can take your time with this sort of stuff as well. No need to rush.
Do you ever step away as well and kind of like come back to it and think about what you need to add after a while?
Yeah, constantly. Sometimes when you've got the reference picture in front of you and it's just the most complicated, beautiful thing, and you compare it to your painting, you just think to yourself, geez, like, it doesn't look like anything, doesn't look anything like that. But actually, when you come back to it afterwards, with a bit of time away from the reference photo, you actually can appreciate your painting a lot more. And I find there were times where I'd be painting when I was starting out and I'd just give up. I'd look at it at this point, I'd be like, it doesn't look anything like what I wanted. But the trick is you got to persist. You got to persist, and you got to give yourself a chance to get through the painting and to look at that painting in isolation from the reference. And that's the only thing the painting should stand on its own regard. Compare it to the reference. It should be its own form of artwork, and rather than trying to represent and copy the reference picture exactly. That's why it's called a reference, in my opinion.
You can kind of use your own judgment.
And notice when I'm touching the paper, you know, just let it do its thing. You know, draw the shape that you're trying to draw, that line, and just leave it. What happens? What can make a painting turn a little bit messy is when you start going in and start fiddling around. Oh, that doesn't look the way. I just got to tidy that up, and suddenly you just got this complete situation where everything's blending together and turns into chaos. So be confident with your brush strokes. And when I say that, I mean just place what you want in there, and then just let it do its thing. I just thought I'd get in the side of that building a little bit more, like that. There. This is just all tweaking around. I mean, to be honest, we could stop right here and get in some boats and things like that already. And I'll probably do that actually. You know, we can just keep on tweaking around and doing this, but I don't want to spend, you know, all day doing that. I think that's enough sort of shadows and things to imply the lights and all that sort of stuff on the buildings. So what I'm going to do now, now we've got all these vertical lines running down for these the light and stuff like that. what I'm going to do is I'm going to emphasize some of these a bit more by picking up some purple or a bit of neutral tint, just a dark color. And you've got to be very careful with this as well. You want to have these dry brush strokes. So dry off the brush, pick up that paint. It's almost 3/4 paint, 1/4 water, very little water. And you're just touching it onto the page and dragging down like this. Okay, and I like to stand up when I'm doing this as well. Just helps me to get in a little bit more in the painting. So just a few little downward strokes. Okay, and spot to the flat brush as well, smaller flat brush. Okay, kind of like this, where it just skips over the paper, and you get this sort of skip sort of look. And that's why I say it's really important to, when you're using, when doing a sort of scene like this, a medium or a cold pressed paper, it works best.
Does it help bring out the texture a little bit more with that cold press?
That's right. Yeah, 100%. It makes things a lot easier to just scratch in these little details and get that skipping on the paper like you see here.
Yeah, yeah. It does look amazing.
It's just making sure you've got a little bit of paint on there, just a little bit. And then the dryness of the brush is the most important thing. Just dry that brush off on the side.
So are you kind of tapping it on that towel again just to make sure it's nice and dry?
That's right. Yeah, because I don't want a large sort of blob of paint kind of appearing here. And if I say we'll just try, I'll show you what happens if we've got too much paint on. Well, that actually looks okay, but if I've got too much, it'll turn out like that, and you'll get this sort of streaky, more really wet sort of look here in the foreground. This here is actually a bit of a, I think it's a dock or something like that. So I'll just pop that in while I'm there. Okay.
Guys, Darren tried to mess up for us, but he couldn't do it. It's all right. It looks amazing. We're totally inspired tonight. How are you all feeling? Is everyone on their dry brush strokes right now, adding to that beautiful water? One of our viewers had typed in earlier how there's such a beautiful glaze down the center with that, where we were kind of keeping the water misted, and that just turned out so beautiful.
This section, yeah. And you want to leave stuff like this. And, I know I'm doing a lot of these little dry brush strokes, and it is going over that previous glaze. And you just want to make sure that you're not getting rid of that whole glaze in the background, because the combination of these dry brush strokes with the softness of these wet and wet brush strokes, that's what creates this entire effect. So you're leaving in areas, having different techniques. I always think of it as kind of this weird opposition of colors and complementaries, light and dark, everything like that. You've got to have both in there for it to make sense. So both sides kind of bring out the strengths of each.
One of our viewers says, loving how the colors and the brush strokes combine to suggest the forms. It's such a wonderful workshop.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I really hope you guys are getting a lot out of this. And while I'm here, ask questions, ask anything. I want to make it worth your while watching along. So the last step is really we're putting in the darkest of the darkest tones. It's kind of like this these brush strokes here that I've done on the building. It's probably a little bit too dark for the building, but we're looking at putting in some boats, some of these little pylons as well. What do they call them? These little wooden poles. So I'm going to go through and let's go ahead and give this a shot. I'm going to mix up here a little bit of burnt umber. Okay, just a bit of, just a brown, really. It doesn't matter what, and a little bit of blue. tiny bit of blue and burnt umber. And I want this to be pretty, pretty dark. Okay, pretty dark. It's almost, you know, just a touch of water so that it is liquid. But what I'm going to do is dry off that brush, pick that off, dry off that brush, and we're going to go in and just start putting in some small details. So this here is actually the, you know, the landing area, I suppose, of this this building here. But here we are. We're just putting in some little dark brush strokes. You want to be bold with these brush strokes. Once, touch the paper once, and continue on. Just move on. There's one, and they're pretty dark as well. Okay, so make sure that these strokes are darker than everything else. I should have some. So here I've missed out some windows. So we can always do that later.
And if you guys have any questions that you would like to type into the chat, we are getting close to wrapping up our mini workshop. We're going to spend a little bit time going over today, but if you have any questions, type them in the chat. And of course, if you need to head out, know that this recording is coming your way. So we will definitely send it to you. If you are here in a time crunch, just look out for that recording. We'd love for you to finish watching and be a part of it.
Thank you, Anna. So what I'd like to do as well, while these little poles and things are here, just drop in some of these boat shapes. Now think of it as they're almost like a U or something. So it's like a U shape, like that. One movement like that. Just drop them in. I'm doing these all the same, but you kind of want to have a few on an angle as well. Just vary them up a little bit. Have some of them overlapping with each other. And the brush that I'm using is a very, the brush stroke that I'm using is quite sort of a dry brush stroke still. You know, here, you know, we've also got some of this landing dock area. Areas that sort of stick out, which I'm going to cut around a little bit, really just implying stuff that's there. There's a larger one here. You know, and this is where all that drawing practice comes in handy. You know, you're drawing with the brush, getting in these little bits and pieces here. And it's why I say, try not to spend all too much time on the drawing to get in the little details. Get those in with your brush, because you're going to have to draw them back in later with the brush anyway. You know, there's so many things you can pick out from here. There's even a couple of little flags coming off the side of that building, which you can pick up a tiny bit of paint. Just grab a small round brush and imply that flag, a couple of flags. Let's give this a try, like that, maybe like this, and like that. So just a couple of strokes. On top of the buildings, there's all little bits of detail as well. And until I forget, I just will drop in a few little windows and things here to that one.
Also, like as you're going back for the final details, sometimes you notice things that you want to add even more.
Yeah, and often I sort of swap between sides. I get bored of painting one side, or I feel like I'm kind of working on this way too much. Then I'll swap over and do the other side. So it provides, just gives you a little bit of a break as well.
And as you're adding these details to the water, are you still looking at your reference photo to kind of see what's going on?
Yeah, I've got the reference photo with me, and I use that for a bit of guidance in terms of where things are, where the shapes are, where the windows are, maybe some shapes of the windows. You know, if I start to, sometimes if you don't have a reference, you end up doing all the shapes and they all look pretty much the same. So having a bit of that reference there give you more of an idea to change things up or place boats in a different area or change up change up the boat so that, you know, there's a different style in there or something like that. You know, another thing is that there's also kind of these vertical lines coming off, again, these dry brush lines coming off some of these poles and things, which you can use that same technique to sort of do this like that, just off the little poles.
So you're thinking about the reflection there too.
That's right, yeah. And you know, the thing is that this actually accomplishes a very important part. It joins everything. It joins all this middle section to the bottom, because it's a part of joining a painting together is one of the most important things. So, you know, having the sky sort of join on here, maybe some areas here, and sort of melt into some of the buildings, and then having this shape connect on with the ground, all this stuff here. It's really important, and it's hard to explain, but when you look back at a distance, it makes sense. Some of these things going down into the foreground like that just brings together everything.
You can absolutely tell the little strokes you're making we could see the connection. It's great.
Yeah, it all kind of adds up in a strange way. Underneath the boats, you can just do a bit of a scribble, or, you know, even pick up a larger flat brush. Try to get in a little bit of that, but I don't want to overdo it. Another thing I like to do is, you know, here in the foreground, I'll show you, you can leave it like this, or what you can do is get in some sharper looking shadows. So, waves. So you can see these softer waves here in the front, right? Another way that you can add shadows, waves, is just to get a bit of darker color, and to basically just drop them in after everything's dried. It may or may not look so good here, but we'll give it a try. So just a little bit here, okay. And I'm just going to drop in a little bit of that. I don't want to get rid of all of this beautiful sort of glaze over the top, the previous glaze though, but just a little bit of work like that.
So similar to that stroke you were doing as you're painting the water before?
Pardon me?
With the brush, so similar stroke with your brush?
Yeah, so quick sort of strokes, especially down the front. You want the waves to be bigger at the front and smaller as you move up, okay? I'm also doing this because, again, I want to try to connect on the water down the front with some of these little reflections and things at the back, so that it doesn't look too disjointed, so that your eye moves through the painting a little bit. So, you know, trying to be kind of sporadic with it as well. Change up some of these waves as some of them go off at a funny angle and things like that. Okay, great. Maybe some darker ones here.
As we're adding in these final touches here, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And I'm also going to drop our link for our survey. If you have a minute, please fill that out for us. We love to hear from you guys and see how we can improve, or what we're doing really well with, and share your work. We're almost to the end where we get to see all your beautiful work. If you're interested in sharing, you can share that way, or you can use #@yourstudio to share your work with us on Instagram or Facebook.
Yes, we'd love to see some of your work. So, and, you know, if you want some feedback as well, feel free to add it here, or just message me as well on Instagram. I'm always happy to give you feedback. Just let me know if you want some constructive feedback too. I can provide a little bit of that. So we're pretty much done here. I think, you know, really at this point, you can just go through and tidy things up. You might want to add in another boat or something over on that side. But really, a lot of this is, you know, a lot of the details and everything that I wanted to portray in this scene is here. Probably if I were to do it again, I wouldn't have gone so far up with some of these little strokes here. Kept a little bit more of that light on there, but it still looks okay. Fantastic. And I think some of you guys also sort of maybe in you know, middle way through, so there's probably a few more things that you want to add on and darken as well. You know, that's the great thing about this sort of point where you've got all the light colors in and all these softer shapes in. Once all those the sort of wet work is done, you can actually relax a little bit and just figure out all the darker areas. And really it's just looking at the reference photo, looking, okay, the roofs are darker than this side of the building, the sky is darker than the building, so I've got to darken that bit of the sky, and you're under less sort of time constraints at that point.